Sign the papers, Dad, or I'll have you declared incompetent. My son David said it so coldly, like he was reading a grocery list, not dismantling my life. He called me a burden. He thought I was just a weak old man ready for the scrap heap. But 3 weeks later, I sat across from him in a boardroom and used a 40-year-old secret to burn his greedy world to the ground. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. Let me back up and explain how a quiet retirement turned into a war with my own blood. My name is Robert. I'm 68 years old. The smell of sawdust used to be the smell of home. For 40 years, it was my life. I built things, cabinets, furniture, a business. I built a family. My workshop behind the house was my sanctuary. It was where I felt closest to Mary, my wife. Mary's gone now, 8 months. The house is too big. The silence is too loud. My hands shake a little these days. Lifting heavy oak is harder than it used to be. I thought I was just old and grieving. I didn't realize I had become a problem that needed solving. It started slowly, the way rot sets into wood. My son David and his wife Jessica started visiting more often. I was grateful at first. I thought they cared. I thought they were worried about me being alone in this big old house. I was wrong. They weren't there for me. They were there for the house. It was a Sunday afternoon. David was stirring his coffee in my kitchen. He always wore a suit, even on weekends. He works in commercial real estate, always talking about leverage and assets. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the walls, the ceiling beams. "Dad, you look exhausted," he said. His voice was smooth. Too smooth. "It's just the quiet, David," I replied. I looked out the window toward the workshop. "I miss the noise. I miss your mother." David didn't even blink. He just kept scanning the room. He didn't see a home. He saw a property listing. And then Jessica chimed in. Jessica's voice is like wind chimes, pretty to listen to, but hollow. She leaned forward. Her perfume was expensive and overwhelming. "Robert, this house is just so much work for you," she said. She didn't meet my eyes. The upkeep, the cleaning, the big yard. She paused, looking out the window toward my workshop. Her lip curled slightly. Then she delivered the first cut. "And that old workshop out back. Honestly, it's an eyesore. It's practically falling down." An eyesore. My workshop. It wasn't falling down, it was solid. I built it myself. The foundation was deep. The beams were strong. That workshop paid for David's college. It paid for their wedding. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her manicured nails. They looked like claws. "It's fine, Jessica," I said, my voice tight. But that wasn't the worst part. The real attack was coming. "We've been thinking," David said. He didn't wait for me to respond. He pulled a glossy brochure from his expensive leather briefcase. The cover showed smiling seniors playing cards. They looked trapped in a brightly lit room. Golden Creek Retirement Living. "What's this?" I asked. My voice felt weak. "It's a wonderful place, Dad," David said. "The salesman pitch. They have a chef, activities, a swimming pool. You wouldn't have to worry about a single thing." I looked at the brochure. The rooms looked like hotel rooms, small, sterile, smelling of disinfectant instead of sawdust. I imagined myself sitting in one of those rooms, staring at the walls, waiting to die. "I don't need a chef," I said, pushing the brochure away. "I like my cooking. I like my house." "But Robert," Jessica leaned in closer. She placed a hand on my arm. Her touch felt cold. The tension in the room suddenly spiked. "Think of the burden this place is," she whispered. The sweetness in her voice was gone, replaced by something sharp. "We worry constantly. If you fell, if something happened." The clock on the mantel ticked loudly. David wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared into his coffee cup. The silence stretched, thin and brittle. Jessica waited, her eyes hard. "It's honestly quite selfish of you to put us through that stress," she said. Selfish. She called me selfish. I spent my entire life working for this family, building this security, and now I was selfish for wanting to enjoy it, for wanting to stay where my memories lived. I swallowed hard. The word tasted like ash. For a second, I wondered if she was right. Had I become nothing more than a liability? I shook my head, trying to clear the doubt. "I appreciate the thought," I said, keeping my voice steady, "but I'm not ready for the glue factory just yet." David sighed. A sharp, impatient sound. He checked his expensive watch. "Dad, You have to be reasonable, he said. He wasn't asking. He was telling. You can sell the house and the workshop property, David continued. The land value in this neighborhood has gone through the roof. He talked about money, banking the profits, living worry-free. He never once talked about home. They weren't worried about my comfort. They were worried about their profit, and they were just getting started. I started paying closer attention after that. I watched them when they visited. Jessica's eyes didn't look at me. They looked past me. They scanned the walls, the fixtures, the view of the large backyard. She wasn't visiting me. She was appraising the furniture. A few days later, I was making coffee when I saw movement outside. It was Jessica. She was pacing the property line near the workshop. She had a measuring tape in her hand. She was whispering urgently into her phone. When she saw me, she jumped. She quickly pocketed the tape. "Oh, Robert, you scared me," she laughed. The sound was brittle. Just admiring the view. Lies. She always smiled when she lied. I knew then that this wasn't just a suggestion. It was a plan. A plan that didn't include me. I needed advice. I called John. He was my oldest friend and former business partner. We started the cabinetry business together 40 years ago. John handled the money while I handled the wood. He understood numbers. More importantly, he understood loyalty. We met at the old diner downtown, the one with the sticky vinyl booths and the best pie in the county. "They want me to sell the place, John," I told him. The words tasted bitter. John frowned. His expression was serious. He didn't waste words. "The market is crazy right now, Robert. That double lot you have, it's worth a fortune." "I know what it's worth to the market," I said, stirring my cold coffee. "But it's my home, John. Mary is still here." "What's David's angle?" John asked. Blunt as always. "He says he's worried. Jessica says I'm a burden." John snorted. Jessica wouldn't know a real burden if it came with a designer label. He leaned across the table. His eyes were hard. "Be careful, Robert. When family starts talking about land value instead of memories, it's time to watch your back. Don't sign anything." His words chilled me. I didn't want to believe my own son was the enemy, but the evidence was piling up.
How did we get here? I thought I knew my son. I was about to find out I didn't know him at all.
A few days later, my daughter Sarah came by. Sarah is the bright spot in my life. She's different from David. She's a nurse, grounded, kind. She took after her mother. "Dad, what's this?" "I hear about you moving," she asked, hugging me tight. I could feel the worry radiating off her. "David and Jessica's latest idea," I said. "A place called Golden Creek." Sarah's face darkened. She pulled back and looked me straight in the eye. "That place? Dad, I've had patients there. It's depressing. It smells like bleach and sadness. Why would you ever leave this beautiful home? They seem very eager to get me out, sweetheart." The truth hung heavy in the air between us. It was ugly, but it needed to be said. Sarah walked over to the window. She looked out at the workshop. Her reflection looked tired. "I talked to David yesterday," she said, her voice quiet. I waited. I braced myself. "He was asking me if I wanted any of the old tools from the workshop." "The tools?" She paused, her voice tight. "He said before they clear it out." "Clear it out." The words echoed in the quiet kitchen. I had told him explicitly I wasn't moving. I pictured the workshop empty, the saws silent forever. I told him explicitly I wasn't moving. I said, my voice was shaking with anger. "He spoke like it was already a done deal, Dad," Sarah said. Anger flashed in her eyes. "Dad, I don't trust Jessica, and David, he's changed. He's always chasing the next dollar. He wasn't raised like that." My blood ran cold. They weren't asking anymore, they were planning, and I was just an obstacle in their way. The realization hit me harder than I expected. The tension built over the next week. It was a siege. David called every day, pressing me. "Had you thought about it, Dad? The market is peaking. We have to act fast." He was trying to wear me down, to break my spirit, but then he crossed a line. "Golden Creek has an opening on the first floor," David said during one call. "It's a corner unit. Very nice." I put a deposit down. He put a deposit down. Without asking, he was boxing me in, making decisions for me, treating me like a child. But the real betrayal was still waiting in the shadows. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was being stubborn. Maybe I was clinging to the past. Mary was gone. The house was empty. I went out to the workshop. I ran my hands over the worn surface of my workbench. The wood was smooth and familiar under my fingertips. This was real. This was mine. I wouldn't let them take it, but I didn't know how to stop them. Then came the ultimatum. It was a Thursday afternoon. David and Jessica showed up at my door. They didn't knock. They just walked in. They didn't even pretend it was a social visit this time. No coffee. No small talk. David had a thick stack of papers in his hand. His face was set, determined. This was it. The final push. They walked into my kitchen, like they already owned it. David spread the documents on my table. "Dad, we need to finalize this," he said. His tone was clipped. Final. I looked at the papers. They were sale agreements. My address was at the top. And then I saw it. The house was already listed as pending. My heart hammered in my chest. They had already sold my house. Without my permission. "I told you, David, I'm not selling." David's face hardened. The son I knew, the boy I taught to fish, the boy I taught how to use a lathe, was gone. In his place was a stranger with cold, greedy eyes. "Look, I'm trying to help you," he said, leaning forward. "I'm trying to make this easy, but you're being stubborn and frankly irrational." Irrational. The word stung. Irrational. Because I want to stay in my own home? My voice was rising. "It's not just your home anymore, Robert," Jessica snapped. Her sweet mask slipped completely. The ugliness underneath was finally exposed. "It's a major financial asset, and it's being wasted on one person." "Wasted. We have needs too," she continued, her voice sharp. "We have plans for our future, and your stubbornness is standing in the way of everything." "Your plans?" I asked. "What about my life? What about my plans?" David leaned in close. His voice dropped low and cold, dripping with menace. This was the moment everything changed. "This is happening, Dad. We have a buyer lined up, a very motivated buyer. If you sign today, we handle everything. You move to Golden Creek, and we all move on." He paused. The threat hung heavy in the air. "If you fight us, we will have you declared incompetent." Incompetent. The word hit me like a slap in the face. They were threatening to take away my freedom, my dignity, my mind, all for money. My own son. "You've been confused lately," David continued, twisting the knife. His eyes were dead, forgetting things, leaving the stove on. "Sarah even mentioned how worried she is." My heart hammered against my ribs. "That's a lie. Sarah never said that. I've never left the stove on." He was using my daughter against me. He was gaslighting me. The cruelty of it stole my breath. "It doesn't matter what she said," David said, waving his hand dismissively. "It matters what we can prove in court." He tapped a stack of papers. "Sign the papers, Dad. You have until tomorrow morning, or I start the legal proceedings. You won't win." He wasn't finished. He saved the worst for last. "You'll end up in a state-run facility instead of the nice place we picked out. Think about it." He looked me straight in the eye. Then the words that broke me. "You're just an extra burden now, Robert. And it's time we dealt with it." He left the papers on the table. The door clicked shut behind them. The silence of the house felt like a suffocating blanket. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The stack of papers blurred in front of me. A burden, incompetent. The cruelty was staggering. I had given that boy everything. College tuition, the down payment on his first house. My time, my love, and this was how he repaid me. I felt old, tired, defeated. The fight seemed to drain out of me, leaving behind a hollow ache. They were going to win. They were going to take my home, my workshop, my memories. I looked at the picture of Mary on the mantel. What would she say? She would fight. But then the sadness turned into something else, something hot and sharp. Rage. They thought I was weak. They thought I was confused. They thought I would just roll over and let them steamroll me. They were wrong. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking. But this time it wasn't age. It was fury. I called John. They're threatening to have me declared incompetent if I don't sell. John, I said. My voice cracked. They said I'm a burden. John was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but hard as steel. Okay, the gloves are off. Who is the buyer? I don't know. David just said motivated. Look at those papers they left. There should be a buyer name. I shuffled through the documents. My eyes focused on the buyer line. It just says Apex Development Group. Apex, John muttered. Okay, I'll look into them. Robert, you need to protect yourself. Change the locks. Today, and get a security camera. Change the locks. Against my own son. This wasn't a disagreement. This was war. The next morning, I went to the hardware store. I bought the strongest deadbolts they had. It felt like I was barricading myself against my own family. A sad, lonely feeling. When I got back, there was a car parked in my driveway. Not David's BMW. A sleek, expensive sports car. A man I didn't recognize was walking around my workshop, kicking the siding, peering in the windows. Can I help you? I called out, gripping the bag of deadbolts. The man turned, young, overly confident. A predatory smile, he looked slimy. Mr. Miller, I'm Kevin. He paused, letting the name hang in the air. Jessica's brother. Jessica's brother. The wild card. I'd met him maybe twice. He was always between ventures. Which meant unemployed and looking for a handout. He had the same cold eyes as his sister. What are you doing here, Kevin? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Just checking out the property for Apex Development, he said smugly. Apex. He was involved too. He leaned against the workshop wall like he owned it, making sure everything is ready for the demolition crew next week. Demolition? How does in? They were so sure of themselves. They hadn't even closed the deal, and they were already planning to tear down my life's work. I felt a surge of pure hot rage. I wanted to throw him off my property, to scream at him. But John's voice echoed in my head. Be careful, play it smart. I forced a smile. It felt like my face might crack. It's solid construction, I said evenly. Might be harder to tear down than you think. Kevin laughed. A harsh, barking sound. Nothing's hard to tear down with the right equipment, old-timer. Old-timer, old-timer. The disrespect was casual, cruel. It stung, but it also fueled the fire inside me. They had no idea who they were dealing with. He got back in his expensive car and drove away. The real betrayal was still waiting in the shadows. I spent the afternoon changing the locks. Each turn of the screwdriver felt like I was sealing myself off from the world. That evening, John called. His voice was grim. The news was worse than I imagined. I looked into Apex Development, he said. It's a shell corporation. Registered only 2 months ago. A shell? What does that mean? It means they're hiding the owners, John explained. But I have contacts at the city planning department. I dug deeper. He paused. I could hear the hesitation in his voice. The plans they filed are massive. Robert, what plans? They aren't just tearing down your house to build a new one. They are planning a high-end, multi-unit luxury condo complex. 16 units. Condos? Here? I was stunned. The neighborhood was zoned for single-family homes. They got a variance, John said. Someone pulled strings downtown. David used his connections. This project is worth millions. It was bigger than I thought. Much bigger. My head was spinning. But the worst was yet to come. And Robert, John said, his voice dropping. I found out who is running Apex. I braced myself. I sat down heavily in my favorite chair. It's David, and Jessica, and Kevin. The air in the room felt thin. I couldn't breathe. I gripped the arms of the chair until my knuckles turned white. The silence stretched out. They are the partners, John continued. They aren't just selling your property, Robert. They are the buyers. They are developing it themselves. They stand to make millions. Millions. The depth of the betrayal hit me like a physical blow. They weren't worried about me. They weren't trying to help me. They were stealing my legacy to fund their greed. They saw my grief after Mary died, and they used it as leverage. They saw an old man they could push aside. They thought they had won, They were about to find out how wrong they were. John laid out the options. We can fight the sale, Robert. Expose their conflict of interest, the self-dealing. He didn't sugarcoat it. It will be messy, public, expensive. It will destroy what's left of your relationship with David, John warned. Forever. I looked at the picture of Mary. Her eyes seemed to look right through me. She would never have allowed this injustice. Peace was no longer an option. We fight, I said. My voice was stronger than it had been in months. We fight for everything. The decision was made. The battle lines were drawn. The next few days were a whirlwind. Sarah came over to help me gather financial documents. She was devastated by David's action, but the devastation quickly turned to fury. He's completely under Jessica's thumb, she raged, slamming a file cabinet drawer shut in my study. She wants the lifestyle, the status, the big house on the hill. She doesn't care who she steps on to get it. She looked at me, her eyes fierce. To do this to Dad, it's unforgivable. If this story is keeping you hooked, drop a like. It means a lot. Because the rabbit hole went even deeper. While we were digging through the papers, the phone rang. It was my cousin, Susan, a notorious gossip. I hadn't talked to her in months. Robert, dear, Susan said, her voice dripping with fake concern. I just had lunch with Jessica. Here we go. She's terribly worried about you, Susan continued. She said you're having some difficulties, memory issues, and that you accused David of trying to steal your house. That sounds very serious, Robert. The rumor campaign had started. Jessica was already isolating me, painting me as a confused, paranoid old man before I could expose the truth. They were poisoning the well. I felt the sting of humiliation. My own extended family was starting to doubt my sanity. I wanted to scream the truth at Susan, to defend my honor, but I knew that would only feed the narrative, that I was unstable. I had to remain calm. I'm fine, Susan, I said, my voice tight. Just dealing with some complicated business issues. Don't believe everything you hear from Jessica. I hung up, feeling more alone than ever. They were boxing me in, and we were about to hit a major snag. We hit a major snag when we started looking closely at my bank accounts. After Mary died, I was drowning in grief. David offered to help me with my finances, to organize the bills, manage the accounts online. I trusted him. I let him help. I was a fool. Dad, I don't understand this, Sarah said. We were in the study, staring at the computer screen. Her finger traced a line of numbers. There are large withdrawals here. Monthly. Going back 6 months. What are they for? I asked, peering at the screen. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. They're transfers, Sarah whispered, horrified, to an account owned solely by David Miller. He had been bleeding me dry, systematically draining my savings, thousands of dollars at a time. He wasn't just trying to take the house, he was making me financially dependent, weakening my ability to fight back, making it look like I couldn't manage my own affairs. It was calculated. It was cold. It was evil. I went straight to the bank. I needed to freeze my accounts, to stop the bleeding. The manager, Mr. Adams, had known me for 20 years. He looked uncomfortable when I explained the situation. Mr. Miller, I'm terribly sorry, he stammered, shuffling papers on his desk. He wouldn't meet my eyes. What is it, Mr. Adams? David has full power of attorney over these accounts. Power of attorney. I remembered signing the document, shortly after Mary's funeral. I was numb with grief. David said it was just in case. I got sick. He said it was to protect me. I had been manipulated. We can't freeze the accounts without his authorization. Or a court order, Mr. Adams said apologetically. I realized how truly powerless I was. They had thought of everything. They had me trapped. We needed a lawyer, a good one, a shark. I called the best estate lawyer in town. His secretary told me he couldn't represent me. Conflict of interest. I called another top firm. Same story. And another. David had been thorough. He had preemptively consulted with all the top law firms in the city, making it impossible for me to hire them against him. They were suffocating me, legally, financially, emotionally. I was cornered. I was tired, and I was almost out of hope. They were suffocating me, legally and financially. But we had to find someone. Finally, we found a lawyer, a young guy named Alex Chen. He was fresh out of law school. Eager, idealistic, but clearly inexperienced. His office was small and sparsely decorated. He reviewed the documents, the shell corporation, the power of attorney. He didn't look hopeful. "Mr. Miller, this is complicated," Alex said, rubbing his temples. "The power of attorney is legally binding. Proving that David manipulated you into signing it while you were grieving will be very difficult." "It's my word against his," I said, the despair creeping back in. "Exactly," Alex said. "And the sale agreement, it's ironclad assuming you sign it." "But it's my property," I shouted, slamming my fist on the desk. "And they are the buyers. They lied to me. They stole from me."
"I know," Alex said gently.
"The morality is non-existent. But legally they haven't done anything explicitly illegal yet. They are playing hardball, but within the lines. His advice? Settle. Demand a higher percentage of the development profits," Alex suggested. "It's the cleanest, safest way out. Settle. Give in. Let them win." The thought made me physically ill. I was tired. I felt fit. Maybe Alex was right. Maybe I was just an old man standing in the way of progress. Maybe I should just take the money and go quietly to Golden Creek. But then I thought about my workshop. I thought about Mary. I thought about the cold, cruel look in my son's eyes when he called me a burden. I couldn't let it go. "No settlement," I said, my voice firm. "We fight." Alex looked skeptical, but he nodded. "Okay, Mr. Miller, we fight." But we were fighting with sticks against tanks. We needed a miracle. We were running out of time. The deadline for the sale finalization was approaching fast. David was confident, arrogant. He sent me a text message. Cold and impersonal. "The moving truck is scheduled for Monday at 8 a.m. Be ready." He didn't even have the decency to call. He acted like I was already gone. I was desperate. I felt the walls closing in. They had outmaneuvered me at every turn. I went back to the workshop. I needed to think, to be surrounded by the things I understood. I sat on my old stool, running my hands over my workbench. This place held my history, my memories. It had to hold the key. I started looking through the old business records, the dusty file boxes stacked in the corner. I hadn't opened them in decades. The original incorporation papers for the business I started with John, the deeds to the property, the agreements we had signed when we were young and hungry and full of dreams. My fingers brushed against a thick leather-bound folder. I pulled it out, and then I saw it. It was buried in the original partnership agreement between John and me. A clause I had completely forgotten about. A clause John, with his financial foresight, had insisted on when we first bought this property together. We were young. We wanted to protect our dream, a right of first refusal and control clause. It was dense, legal jargon, but the meaning was clear. It stated that if either partner ever decided to engage in a venture that sought to fundamentally alter the assets of our original partnership, including the real estate, the other partner had the right to block the venture, or even better, take complete control of it by buying out the initial investment at cost. It was a poison pill designed to protect us from each other, to ensure that one partner couldn't just turn the workshop into a parking lot without the other's agreement. But maybe, just maybe, it could protect me from my son. I called John. My heart was pounding with a sudden surge of hope, the first hope I had felt in months. "John, find your copy of our original partnership agreement," I said, my voice trembling with excitement. "Read Article 5, Section 3. I heard the rustling of papers on the other end of the line. Then a long silence. "Robert," John said, his voice filled with awe. "This changes everything. This is a nuclear option. David's condo project fundamentally alters the assets. It triggers the clause, but David wasn't part of the partnership," I argued, trying not to get my hopes up. "I bought you out of the property years ago." "It doesn't matter," John said, excitement rising in his voice. "The clause is tied to the asset, not the ownership structure. It runs with the land. It was never extinguished. It's still valid. We had a weapon, a real one, but there was a catch. A big one." "Robert," John said, his voice turning serious, This clause requires the challenging partner to buy out the initial investment. At cost. He paused. David and his crew have already invested heavily. Fees, permits, zoning variances, architectural plans. It could be close to $1 million. Maybe more. Do you have that kind of money? I didn't. David had made sure of that by draining my savings. No, I said. The hope drained away as quickly as it had arrived. I was broke. I was still going to lose. But I do, John said firmly. The words hung in the air. A lifeline. I'll front the money, John said. We're still partners, Robert. I hesitated. This was John's money. His retirement. His security. If this legal challenge failed, if the clause didn't hold up in court, he would lose everything too. It was a massive risk. John, that's your life savings, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I can't let you risk that. You aren't letting me, Robert, John insisted, his voice rough. I'm choosing to. We built this together. We'll save it together. We had a plan. It was audacious. Risky. It relied entirely on surprise. We had one shot to blow their greed apart. The day of the final meeting arrived. It was held in a sleek, modern conference room downtown, David's real estate office. The atmosphere was thick with tension and the smell of expensive coffee. David, Jessica, and Kevin sat on one side of the long mahogany table. Smug, triumphant. They were already celebrating. Jessica was wearing a nude diamond necklace. Blindingly expensive. I overheard her talking to Kevin about a vacation to Italy they were planning. They were already spending the money. The lawyers for Apex Development were there. A slick, middle-aged man named Mr. Harrison led the team. They didn't see the storm coming. I walked in with John and Alex. David looked surprised to see John. His expression quickly turned dismissive. Dad, I see you brought moral support, he sneered. It won't change anything. The papers are ready. The money is waiting. Let's get this done. Stop dragging your feet. We sat down. I looked my son in the eye. He looked right through me. Before we finalize the sale, Alex said. His voice was shaking slightly, but he stood up straight. We have a matter to discuss regarding the property's legal status. David sighed impatiently. He rolled his eyes. He checked his watch. Make it quick, kid, he sneered at Alex. We have a tight schedule. The demolition crew starts tomorrow. Alex laid the original partnership agreement on the table. The old paper contrasted sharply with the modern glass and steel of the room. Article 5, Section 3, Alex announced. Right of first refusal in Orntoril. David's lawyer, Mr. Harrison, picked it up. He scanned it. And then he laughed out loud. This is ancient history, Harrison scoffed. A 40-year-old business agreement. It has absolutely no bearing on this sale. The partnership was dissolved decades ago. He tossed the agreement back onto the table like it was trash. David smirked, but John didn't flinch. Not dissolved, John corrected him. His voice was calm and steady, radiating authority. It was restructured, but the asset holdings and the governing clauses were extinguished. They run with the land. He leaned forward. The property in question is the primary asset of that partnership. Harrison's smile wavered. He picked up the agreement again. He started reading the clause more carefully. His brow furrowed, the color sought to drain from his face. The silence in the room deepened. This clause states that any venture seeking to fundamentally alter these assets triggers the right of first refusal, John continued, pressing the advantage. Apex Development clearly qualifies. David stood up. His face was red with anger, his composure finally breaking. This is ridiculous, he shouted. This is my property. Dad is selling it to me. I haven't sold anything yet, David, I said. My voice was low and clear. It cut through the tension. Even if this dusty old clause were valid, Kevin interrupted, sneering. He thought he saw an opening. It says you have to buy out our investment, at cost. He looked at me with contempt. You don't have the money. We know you don't. He grinned at David. David made sure of that. This was the moment. The ultimate betrayal laid bare. They admitted they had stolen from me. They were so arrogant they didn't even try to hide it anymore. John didn't hesitate. He pulled a cashier's check from his jacket pocket. He placed it gently on the table. The silence that followed was absolute. "Here is the full amount of your initial investment," John announced. $1,120,000. He looked directly at David. "As per the clause, we are exercising our right to assume complete control of the venture. Apex Development now belongs to us." The room erupted. David stared at the check, his mouth hanging open, his face turned a sickly shade of white. Jessica looked like she was going to faint. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Kevin swore loudly. "You can't do this," David screamed. He pounded his fist on the table. "This project is worth $10 million, $20 million once it's built." "It was worth that," John said coldly. "But according to the agreement you conveniently ignored, the buyout is at cost, not projected value." He delivered the final verdict. "You lose the profit. You lose the control. You only get back what you put in." David turned to his lawyer, panic in his eyes. "Harrison, stop them. Tell them this isn't legal." Harrison shook his head. His face was pale. He avoided David's gaze. He knew he had been beaten. If this agreement is still valid, if the clause runs with the land, they might be right. It's a legally binding contract. The power in the room had shifted completely. The smugness was gone, replaced by sheer terror. I stood up. I looked my son in the eye. I searched for any sign of remorse. Any hint of the boy I raised, I found nothing, only greed and rage. "So," I said, my voice steady, "it seems Apex Development has new management." I turned to Kevin, the man who had called me old-timer. "Kevin, your services are no longer required," I said. "You're fired." Then I looked at David, the son who had called me a burden. "And David, you too, clean out your desk." David lunged across the table. His face was contorted with rage. John stepped between us. "You ruined me," David screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. "You destroyed everything. I leveraged everything for this. My house, my accounts, my reputation. I'm ruined." He was broken, but I felt no joy in his destruction, only a profound sadness. "You ruined yourself, David," I said, the words heavy with grief. "You saw an asset where you should have seen a home. You saw a burden where you should have seen your father." Jessica was crying. Ugly, racking sobs filled the room. The mascara ran down her perfectly powdered cheeks. "What are we going to do?" she wailed. "We have nothing left. I suppose you'll have to find a smaller apartment," I said, turning away, "and maybe learn the value of hard work." We left them there, amidst the ruins of their ambition and greed. As we walked out of the building, the fresh air felt clean. I took a deep breath. It was over. The fallout was immediate and brutal. David and Jessica had leveraged everything. They borrowed heavily against the projected profits. High-interest loans from shady lenders. When they lost control of the project, their creditors came calling. They lost everything. The expensive house on the hill, the BMWs, the diamond necklace. They declared bankruptcy. They moved into a small, cramped apartment across town. The social status Jessica craved evaporated overnight. Kevin disappeared. David tried to call me a few weeks later. I saw his name on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. He begged. He pleaded. He blamed Jessica. He blamed everyone but himself. I didn't return the call. Sometimes the silence is the loudest answer. I had lost a son, and that wound would never fully heal. John and I looked at the plans for the luxury condos. We owned the project. We could have made millions, but I didn't want condos. I didn't want to destroy the memory of my home. So we changed the plans. 6 months later, the old workshop was buzzing with activity again. The smell of sawdust filled the air, but it wasn't just me working there. It was a dozen young men and women, eager faces, learning the trade. We turned the property into the Mary Miller Community Trade School. We offered free courses in carpentry and welding to underprivileged youth. Sarah quit her nursing job to help run the administration. John handled the finances. And me, I taught the advanced cabinetry class. My hands didn't shake as much anymore. I had a purpose again. I had noise in my life again. The sound of saws and hammers filled the air. It was the sound of hope. One afternoon, I was helping a student with a difficult dovetail joint. The sun was streaming through the windows. I looked up at the picture of Mary I had hung above my workbench. I knew she would be proud. I had lost a son, but I had saved my legacy. I was no longer a burden. I was a builder. And I was finally home. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your time matters.